The alarm went off at 6 in the morning, and for the first 10 seconds, I had no idea what day it was. I just lay there in bed, looking up at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the room. My phone was vibrating on the nightstand, buzzing against the wood, and I kept debating whether to get up or pretend I had another hour. Every single morning starts with this exact same mental debate. I always tell myself that today will be the day I wake up instantly, stretch, drink water, and conquer the world. But the reality is always much slower, much quieter, and a lot more messy. I pushed the blanket aside and sat on the edge of the mattress. The floor was cold against my bare feet. I took a deep breath, rubbed my eyes, and finally stood up. The morning light was just beginning to cut through the edges of the curtains, painting a soft, pale gray line across the floorboards. In these first few minutes, the whole house feels like it belongs only to me. There are no notifications yet, no emails calling for attention, and no traffic humming outside the window. It is just quiet. I walked into the kitchen, dragging my feet a little bit. The first goal of the day is always the same: coffee. I filled the kettle with fresh water, turned on the flame, and measured out 2 spoonfuls of ground coffee into my favorite ceramic mug. While waiting for the water to heat up, I stood by the kitchen window and looked out. Down on the street, the world was slowly waking up. An older man was out walking his dog, a tiny little golden dog that wanted to sniff every single leaf on the sidewalk. Across the lane, a shopkeeper was rolling up his metal shutters, the loud metal rattle echoing down the quiet street. It is funny how these small, repetitive actions make you feel grounded. Everyone has their own little rhythm that they start their day with. Then came the first small disaster of the morning. The water boiled, and as I reached to pick up the kettle, my elbow bumped the milk carton on the counter. In a split second, white liquid spilled everywhere. It splashed across the clean counter, dripped down the side of the cabinet, and made a small white puddle right on the floor. I just stood there with the kettle in my hand, staring at the mess, completely frozen. So why does this always happen when you are trying to be calm and aesthetic? I put the kettle down, grabbed a roll of paper towels, and spent the next 5 minutes on my knees, wiping the floor. It was frustrating, yes, but at the same time, I had to laugh at myself. Every daily vlog online looks so polished, so aesthetic, and so peaceful. People pour their morning drinks in slow motion without spilling a single drop. Meanwhile, here I am, barefoot in my kitchen, wiping milk off the wooden floor before I even have a single sip of caffeine. That is the real life right there. Raw, clumsy, and completely unedited. Once the counter was clean again, I finally poured the boiling water into my mug. The smell of fresh coffee instantly changed the whole energy of the room. I sat down at the small dining table, pulled out my notebook, and opened a blank page. I like writing things down with a real pen. There is something satisfying about seeing your day written in ink before it actually happens. I wrote down my plan for the day. It looked simple enough: finish some editing work on my computer, run to the local post office to pick up a package, buy fresh vegetables from the market, do the laundry, and finish cleaning the living room. 5 simple tasks. I thought to myself, this is going to be an easy, smooth, productive day. I will be done by 3 in the afternoon, and then I will have the entire evening to relax, watch a movie, and read a book. That was the plan. But of course, life never really cares about the plans we write down in our little notebooks. By 8 in the morning, I had finished my coffee and sat down at my desk to start work. My laptop screen lit up, and immediately the calm morning was gone. 3 new messages popped up. An urgent update needed my attention, and my internet decided to slow down to a crawl. The little loading circle on the screen just kept spinning and spinning. I stared at the screen, tapping my fingers on the desk, feeling that familiar impatience rising in my chest. You know that feeling when you want to get things done quickly, but technology just decides to take a personal holiday. I restarted the router, waited 3 minutes, plugged it back in, and waited for the green lights to blink. Nothing is more humbling than sitting on your knees under a desk, blowing dust out of an internet router, praying that the Wi-Fi signal comes back to life. Fortunately, it did. I managed to sit down, put on my headphones, and lose myself in my work for the next 2 hours. The clicking of the keyboard, the steady rhythm of finishing tasks, and the ticking of the wall clock became the only sounds in the room. Around 10:30, I leaned back in my chair and stretched my arms over my head. My shoulders were tight, and my eyes felt tired from looking at the bright screen. I had managed to finish the urgent files, but my stomach was starting to growl. It was time to leave the house, run my errands, and get some fresh air. I got up, put on a simple cotton shirt, grabbed a canvas tote bag, and looked for my keys. And this was where the morning detour truly began. My keys were not on the hook by the door. They were not on the table, they were not on my desk. I checked my jacket pockets, checked the pockets of yesterday's trousers, and even checked inside the refrigerator just in case my sleepy morning brain had done something absurd. They were nowhere. For 10 whole minutes, I turned my living room upside down. I lifted the sofa cushions, looked under the coffee table, moved the stack of magazines, and muttered to myself like an insane person. Where do keys even go when you lose them? Do they just enter a parallel universe for 20 minutes just to watch you suffer? Finally, I found them. They were sitting quietly right next to the electric kettle in the kitchen, half hidden behind the sugar. I must have placed them there while cleaning up the spilled milk earlier. I shook my head, grabbed the keys, slid into my sneakers, and walked out the door. The moment I stepped outside the building, the outside world hit me all at once. The fresh breeze, the bright sunlight, the sound of car horns, and the smell of street food being prepared around the corner. It was surprisingly warm. Walking down the stairs, I met my neighbor from the second floor. She was carrying a basket of laundry, heading up to the terrace to hang the clothes in the sun. We smiled, said a quick hello, and exchanged a few words about the weather. These tiny 30-second interactions with neighbors always make a neighborhood feel like home. You do not need to have long, deep conversations with everyone. Just a warm nod, a genuine smile, and a quick greeting are enough to remind you that you are part of a living, breathing community. I walked down the main street toward the post office. The streets were busy. Auto rickshaws were zipping past, bicycles were weaving between pedestrians, and school buses were dropping kids off. I decided not to rush. Usually, when I go out to do errands, I walk as fast as I can, head down, staring at the ground, trying to finish everything in record time. But today, I told myself to slow down, look up, look at the trees along the sidewalk. Look at the old buildings with their peeling paint and beautiful balcony railings. Look at the little stray dog sleeping peacefully in the shade of a parked car. When you slow down your walking pace, the entire city looks completely different. I reached the post office around 11. It is an old government brick building with tall ceilings and large wooden counters that look like they have been there for 50 years. When I walked through the doors, my heart sank a little bit. The queue was long. There were at least 12 people standing in front of the parcel counter, holding their slips of paper, shifting their weight from one foot to another. The ceiling fan above was creaking slowly, making a rhythmic squeaking noise with every rotation. I joined the back of the line and looked down at my slip. The number on my paper was 64, and the counter screen was showing number 48. This was going to take a while. At first, that old urge of frustration crept back in. I thought about all the things I could be doing at home instead of standing in this humid, crowded room. But after a few minutes, I realized something. Standing in a slow queue is actually a rare moment of forced pause. You cannot do work, you cannot clean your room, and you cannot rush the person behind the counter. You just have to wait. So I put my phone in my pocket and decided not to scroll through social media. Instead, I just stood there and observed the room. In front of me was an elderly man trying to send a parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with thick string. He was talking patiently with the postal clerk, asking questions about delivery times, carefully checking the address, written in his neat fountain pen handwriting. Next to him, a young student was nervously waiting to submit an application envelope. There was a quiet, human warmth in that room that you never notice when you are just staring at your smartphone screen. 40 minutes later, it was finally my turn. The clerk took my slip, stamped it with a heavy wooden stamp, walked into the back room, and returned with a medium sized cardboard box. I signed my name on the register, thanked him, and walked out into the bright midday sun holding my parcel. It took almost an hour just to collect one single package, but somehow I did not feel annoyed anymore. The slow pace had actually calmed me down. By now it was past noon and the sun was high in the sky. The temperature had climbed and my throat was dry. I walked toward the local vegetable market. The market is always my favorite part of the day, even though it can be loud, chaotic, and completely overwhelming. As soon as you enter the market alley, the colors and smells hit your senses. Bright red tomatoes piled high in pyramids, crisp green spinach bundles still wet with cold water droplets, dark purple eggplants, and mounds of fresh yellow lemons. The vendors were calling out their prices, negotiating with customers, weighing vegetables on heavy metal scales. I stopped by my regular vegetable stall. The vendor, a cheerful middle-aged man who always wears a faded blue cap, recognized me immediately. He smiled, handed me a black plastic basket, and told me that the coriander and mint were especially fresh today. I picked out some potatoes, fresh green beans, ginger, garlic, tomatoes, and a bunch of cilantro. We chatted for a couple of minutes about how hot the afternoon was getting and how the vegetable prices keep fluctuating every week. While I was paying, he tossed an extra lemon and a couple of green